Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. My name's Adriana Shukla, and I'm here with Snowplow. And today I'm joined with Tristan Burns, who is going to be here to talk about how data teams can demonstrate value to leadership. And I'm going to bring him in. Tristan, thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So, we have a series of questions that we're going to be asking you. And I hope that this will help data teams to really kind of demonstrate the value that they can bring to the organization. And I know that you have a large amount of experience in this area and being able to provide people insight into how to align those goals. So, I'm going to start off with kind of the basics. How can data teams align their work with revenue and business outcomes in a way that leadership actually cares about?
Yeah, so data teams typically are really bad at understanding usually how their work contributes to an organizational strategy. I want to be very careful using the word strategy because in the data space, a lot of people will immediately think we're talking about a data strategy. I'm not. I'm talking about the overarching organizational strategy. What we need to do as data teams to make sure that we've got buy-in from execs and from our own leaders and so forth is to make sure that all the work that we do, all the areas that we apply our efforts and energies really clearly align with the strategic goals that organization has set for itself. We need to be able to speak on any piece of work that we're doing, anytime we're presenting, pardon me, back to the organization, we need to be able to say this piece of work supports this organizational pillar that this organization has prioritized as an important piece for the coming years, couple of years that we're here for.
And in terms of how people, can align with those organizational goals, and sometimes like leadership needs to advocate, data leadership needs to advocate to be in those conversations and have a seat at the table. Do you have any recommendations as to where to start, like where people could start?
Well, yeah, so certainly if we want to be included in the conversations around strategy, we need to provide value and we need to show that we have done work that has contributed strategically in order to be listened to. Oftentimes, we think of data work as being something disparate and separate to a lot overall organizational strategic vision, and operate in something of a silo. We feel that what we do over here doesn't necessarily correlate all that well with what the organization more widely is trying to achieve. So in order for us to be in the conversations and to be considered strategically relevant, we have to make sure that we demonstrate the work that we do and the work that we contribute towards other teams completing, how that has successfully helped deliver strategic goals.
Yeah, and move out of this, task taking mentality to more of a strategic role in what people are playing, right? Is that what you're seeing too?
Absolutely. I work with a lot of data leaders and who say to me, hey, I want to be, more strategic. I want to contribute to the business in a more tangible manner. I want to be more influential. The first thing that person usually goes on to tell me is that their team is treated like a service desk, that 100% of their priorities come from other teams, that they are constantly chasing their tail to complete often biddy tasks that have come through some kind of intake system or have been thrown over the fence or even just lobbed, via WhatsApp or whatever to the data team. I need this now. I need this now. I need this now. So for a data team to act, or a data leader for that matter, to get out from under the pressure of being a reactive service providing team, we have to limit the amount that we do that. And we have to find ways to curtail how much of that work is sent to us so that we can then clear our headspace and clear our calendars to focus on larger, longer term strategic initiatives.
And sometimes it starts off with asking, questions about what are the important things that, leaders say in marketing or sales or product or whatever it may be, are trying to solve for. Like what is their
Yeah.
top question that they're trying and get to know the person that's
Yeah.
leading that team or what they're trying to do and what are the goals that they're trying to accomplish. And
My favorite question for a data leader, or it doesn't have to be the leader, actually, it can be anyone within the team, analysts, even for them to better partner with the business stakeholders. A really great question to go out with is to ask them, what keeps you up at night? So say we were going to go to the head of finance or the director of marketing. Instead of saying, hey, what can I do for you as an analyst or as a data person? Instead, ask them, what keeps you up at night? What is the worst possible thing that might happen to the business that worries you, that keeps you up at night and that concerns you? And
Yeah.
once you know the answer to that question, if possible, if there are ways that you as a data person can proactively contribute to solving that problem for them, or at least limiting the impact that that problem might potentially result in, you're going to make their day. You're going to be their favorite person, and they're going to start including you in more high impact, more strategic type conversations. They're less likely to say, hey, I need this piece of data right now. Hey, I need this, because they know that you're focused on delivering bigger rewards for them.
Right. And, something that I've seen too is that what will happen is that data teams will kind of pass over data without looking at that
Oh,
foundational
yeah.
layer, and looking at what's actually feeding that data and to see if it's one accurate, if it aligns with, what the current strategy is or what's actually happening within the ecosystem. And so
Yes.
I think a big part of it too is kind of QA as well as, understanding that foundational data layer of what's actually fueling, what you're sending over.
Yeah,
Clearly.
data people love to let our work do the talking for us. We like to create a report or create some kind of list of insights and then throw them back and say, my work is done here. Have fun. Go do whatever you like. Problem with this is that it doesn't give data teams the end-to-end visibility of how data gets used. We all talk about wanting to be data-driven and to contribute more strategically, but if we're not clear on how our business partners, and by the way, I'll never use the word customers, our business partners
Yes.
use data and the decisions that they make off the back of that data. If we're not clear on that, we're never, ever, ever going to be able to know what is actually valuable in terms of the data that we produce. We're not going to have that insight. We're not going to have that knowledge. We need to see things come full circle. We need to be in the room when problems are discussed. We need to go away and try and solve those problems from a data standpoint. And not be told what the solution is, by the way, discover that solution for ourselves, provide that back to the business, and then alongside the business, see and help decide what to do next and how that data is going to support those decisions. Then observe the outcomes. Did this result in successful return on investment for the organization? Did this tank completely? Maybe that happened.
Yeah.
But if we don't see those things, and if we don't know that, and we're excluded from it, as we so often are, then it's very difficult to us to know where the actual value lies and how our contribution supports the business's growth.
Right. And I think, something too that, happens is that with data teams, it's important to once you have that data set and be able to answer the questions that the other business partners may have. And so once you understand that foundational layer, you're then able to answer the questions and they feel confident, and it's about that trust and confidence in that data as well, because they want to make sure that what they're receiving is something that they can actually speak to like a wider audience and
Yeah.
not have to backtrack or spin wheels or something if, God forbid, something was not correct in the data set, right? And we're
Yeah.
never going to have 100% accuracy. That's something that I've talked about in my past with others, but it's important to understand the nuance and how much inaccuracy you're willing to have in that data set, and also have answers to that, so that when those questions are asked. So, um,
Certainly. Yeah. I totally
you know,
agree with that.
and so in the course of your time, what's one mistake you've seen data teams make when trying to showcase their value to executives?
Oh,
Would
yeah.
probably maybe refrain from.
So I think this is pretty common for a lot of people early on in their career. They go into conversations with execs and stakeholders very keen to demonstrate that they are knowledgeable, that they are skilled data analysts, that they are technically competent, all of these things. And in doing so, when you go to present information, they tend to overload the audience on the things that they care about. This analysis took me so long. I use this language or these tools to perform this analysis. This analysis is highly complicated for these reasons. They do not care. You are wasting their time and you're wasting your own time. In fact, if you go into Basically, what I'm talking about is don't show you're working. You know, at school when doing a maths class and an exam, they say you won't get full marks unless you show us how you got the answer by showing all of your working. Well, that's really bad advice for data analysts presenting to business stakeholders, because they don't care about the working. They hired you. They trust their own judgment. They brought you into this conversation. Assume that that's all understood and get to the meat of it. Get to what they care about. Know your audience. So who is in your audience? Is the chief executive officer in your audience? Is the CFO in the audience? Is the head of engineering in the audience? Tailor what it is that you have to say and what you are presenting to suit their immediate needs. Do not make them bored. Do not make them feel stupid. That's an important one. And do not make them need to get more information from you in another capacity because you've spent the whole time showing them your working and how you've gone about it.
Yeah.
Reverse engineer this. What do they need to make the next decision? Give them that. Shut up.
Yeah. And sometimes if you're making them ask more questions, that's actually a positive thing, because that means that you're actually getting them to think. It's like,
Depends on
okay,
the question.
that depends on the question. Yes, for sure. If you're showing them a data set and it's like, oh, that's a good question. Okay, let's evolve that and get even more details about this. That
Yes.
I see that as a positive thing. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. So it is a matter of getting to know who your audience is and what they care about and trying to preempt that. If you hit the nail on the head, they're going to have a ton of questions for you.
Right.
If the questions are, what are you saying? I don't understand. Why are you saying that? Then you're in the wrong place. But if the questions are more nuanced and they're very specific, and you can see that by them asking it, they're actually trying to get deeper into it, then that's fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I always see like data sets evolve. And, in my past, I've seen data teams be like, well, here's my delivery, here's my package. Now you want more? Like, like I have a whole
Yeah.
other set of projects that I got to work on, But for me, it's like I see, as a commercial leader, sorry, data teams out there, when I come and you give me a really enticing piece of data that I previously had no idea about, I'm going to have questions and I'm going to
Totally.
want to dig and I'm going to want to understand every single nuance of it. And I see that as a great thing. That's an evolution that you guys can kind of partner on, commercial and data teams, to try to solve for.
Exactly. And we can have a debate about centralized and decentralized data teams. I'm actually quite a big fan of SMEs within data teams for particular business units.
Yeah.
Being able to preempt the questions and getting to know that stakeholder's business intimately and very clearly, I think is a very powerful skill to have, and to have a team that whether they are decentralized or embedded, I don't care, but to have people who are curious about that business line, who understand that business line's customers, their challenges, what keeps the leaders up at night, and all those sorts of things, so that you can preempt and avoid a lot of that iteration, and try and get to the finish line as quickly as possible is a worthy challenge to set for yourself.
And to all the commercial leaders out there that, may be listening into this, bring your data people into the conversation. It's like,
Absolutely.
because for me, how, if I'm trying to solve for something, let's say even in my own role, if my leader doesn't give me the context or give me all of the context, I'm trying to ultimately solve for something that I don't have all the details on.
Yeah.
And so, it leaves a lot of guesswork and assumptions into being able to solve. So if you're bringing in the data leaders for them to hear firsthand what's going on, what's the verbiage, what are the questions that are being asked, what are the things that you're actually trying to solve for, it makes a world of a difference. And it may not be that they're actually contributing in the meetings. It may just be that they're listening. And then in the end, they will be contributing, trust me, because
Absolutely.
then that data will be used.
I think when we don't have what you just described inside an organization, businesses come to data teams from a transactional kind of standpoint and approach. And what they ask data teams to provide is usually the solution that they think they need. So I call this prescriptive solutions.
Mhm.
It's when a stakeholder will come to the data team and say, hey, I need a dashboard, or I need a report, or I need a piece of information data that looks exactly like this, includes these It needs to be cut in this particular way and includes all this. So what you're doing then is you're taking the wind out of the sails of the analyst. They're not going to be doing any analysis. They're going to be producing a custom bespoke prescribed solution for that stakeholder. When if we think about this in another industry, let's take the medical industry, for example. No patient goes to the doctor and says to the doctor, I need these prescriptions because this is what's wrong with me. I need these medications. What happens is you go to the doctor, the patient goes to the doctor and says, I have this ailment, I have this injury, I have this rash or whatever.
Yeah.
And the doctor says, well, let me take a look. All right, that's these things you're going to need these prescriptions. You should go and get this. Whereas in data, we don't often do that. We often wait for them to tell us what they need and we just provide it for them.
Right.
And the reason that is because we do not understand their business well enough and we are not involved in the problems that they have well enough. We need to break that down and partner much more closely with our stakeholders.
Yeah, and that leads me to my next question is that like if a data team has long-term strategic projects that they're working on and then these short-term like high visibility wins, how does one balance the two and how do they make sure that they have this constant like evergreen ability to answer the questions that come to them but also provide that strategic, you know, uh
Yeah.
data set to folks?
So I think I have two answers to this question. The first one is that there's no infinite amount of time or capability within a data team to just constantly receive intake and provide short-term, small, bitty requests and so forth. That needs to be capped, and the data leader themselves will need to be the one to be the bad guy, and that's the bad guy or girl in that scenario, and say, look, the capacity of the team is limited to this much ad hoc, and this much of the remaining time will be spent on strategic initiatives. And within that, prioritizing the things to do and using the organization's overarching strategy as the key component to that prioritization. If we get a request that comes in that has nothing to do with a strategic pillar, and there's a pile of other stuff that needs doing, which one do you think we are not going to prioritize? The one that's not aligned. Now, the other piece of that is you asked me about how do they balance with strategic initiatives. Strategic long-term initiatives you're right having said less tangible because they take longer for the outcomes to be realized and they don't necessarily look like the team is as busy potentially because they're not completing tickets in Jira and they're not sending it back to the team and the team's not getting a hey, well done team, you guys are all champions email every other day. The answer to this question is really, really, really strong communication from the data leader or leaders. They need to be sending around a newsletter potentially within the organization, talking about the things that the team is working on. They need to be hosting lunch and learns to say that this is what we're currently focused on. They need to be in the meetings, presenting their progress, showcasing, doing show and tell, all these sorts of things. It's about selling. And if we don't do a very good job of selling, the questions will come up. What are you guys focused on if you're not focusing on all this ad hoc work that we want to send your way? If you keep saying no to ad hoc principles, ad hoc questions and so forth, what is it that you're actually working on? And if you're not communicative about how else your team is investing its time and resources, then you're going to have difficult conversations.
Yeah, and just constantly that alignment to whatever that business objective is, saying like, I'm doing X, Y, and Z, which will eventually get us to this answer, or
Precisely.
eventually get us to this execution, or whatever it may be. Whether it very well could be on the data team actually doing operationalizing the data instead of analyzing the data, right? And so
Precisely, yeah.
and it's like, what is that? Is it going to bring more revenue to the business? Is it going to bring more answers? What is it bringing? And even not just within the data team, but like any team should really be looking at, how to prioritize their tasks and everything based on what is going to bring the most value to the business and ultimately align to those objectives. So
we are a business. I always say this: we are a business discipline, not a technical one.
yeah,
Firstly.
I love that. I love that. So as people are going into the data space and they're, what's the one skill or mindset shift that you think would help data teams to better communicate their impact?
I think it's what I just said a second ago, to consider data as a business discipline rather than a technical one.
Yeah.
It's challenging to do that because data is very widely seen as a technical discipline. People who come into the data they come into having a data career usually begin as an IC. I actually don't think I've ever met someone who didn't start a data career in some capacity as an IC, unless they've been brought in as a data manager from somewhere else and they've previously not been a data IC.
Mhm.
But getting your mind around the fact that your job is not actually to deliver code or to enable technology, it's actually to deliver business value for the organization and reverse engineering the whole thing. I've even gone on a few podcasts and said, I don't think people should necessarily start their career in data. I can get in a lot of trouble for saying that, but I actually think it's better to come from a different discipline, particularly a business discipline, and learn the data skills that you need to answer the questions that you would have otherwise had as a business stakeholder.
Mm.
Because it's much easier, I think, to an extent, to learn the technical skills than it is to become a very strong business stakeholder, to learn the engagement skills necessary, to understand strategy, to be able to be a very strong communicator with stakeholders and customers and understand that whole side of things. That's what we don't have as data professionals quite typically, and it takes time and investment in ourselves and training and experience to gather that part that often very naturally comes to people in other areas of the organization. They just also happen to lack the data knowledge. So yeah, that is the mindset shift I would encourage.
And, in today's day and age, there's a lot of people that are interviewing and, looking for jobs in the data space. Do you see any like questions or things that an interviewee should be asking the interviewer that could maybe try to gauge what that organization, how they treat their data teams
Yeah.
and how they're structured, and maybe something that they could ask to try to understand, is this a good fit for me?
So I would kind of answer that question in two ways. I think that personally, I believe, because I'm so business biased, I think that starting in a small organization as a data professional is a really good place to be because you get to wear so many hats and see how data works and interoperates with different teams. If you're going into a very large organization, there's a very strong chance that you'll be um, kind of doing the same thing over and over again in a very highly formative, siloed way. Not always siloed, not the best word, but you'll get the reps up on your data skills, but you
Yeah.
won't necessarily get the exposure to the business operations and how everything else is done. So it would really come down to your goals, I think, as a data analyst, as to whether or not you would try and determine what kind of role that data team plays more broadly in the organization. For me personally, I would coach and encourage data analysts at the beginning of their career to start out in a smaller organization where they're going to have more exposure. And for that reason, I think I would ask them to sort of try and get to the bottom of how interconnected the data team is with the other business units, and what kind of challenges do you get to work on, and those sorts of questions.
Yeah, and I find that, when I'm working with our own internal data team here at Snowplow, it's like the same way that I would go to them and say, "Well, what types of data are we able to look at?" Like, show me how everything works, because I'm just an inquisitive person. So I'm like, get me into the details, get me into the raw data, let me see everything. They are doing the same to me. They're saying to me,
Good.
like, you know, what types of advertising are you doing? What platforms are you on? What is the goal of that advertising campaign? What are you trying to drive? Is it brand awareness? Is it lead generation? Is
Mhm.
it actual long-term, like, direct opportunities or progressing opportunities?
Excellent.
What am I trying to do? And actually showing them the intricacies of the platforms and, areas, and then they're like, "We should be tracking that," or "We should be adding that," or, "Oh, we should surface this to combine it with this data set and this data set to make like so when you get that kind of level of collaboration and if you can understand that in the interview process to understand, are they also collaborating, cross departmentally? I think it's really important because
Yeah.
that's ultimately how you'll succeed.
I think it sounds like you guys have hired really well. Kudos to your data team.
I love working with our data team, and it's actually the first organization that I feel really strongly connected with them, which is really great. I mean,
Fantastic.
we should be given Snowplow, is a data company. So, but yeah, I really enjoy working with them. So it's nice, and that's kind of the relationship that I hope that others would want to foster too.
Excellent. Yeah, it sounds like you set the tone.
Yeah. So but anyways, this was meant to be just kind of a short, quick, little chat to understand how data teams can, demonstrate that value. Hopefully people got some value out of this. I know, Tristan, you've got quite a bit going on your side. And if people want to, follow along or, try to figure out what they can do next with you, I know that you guys have a book club.
Yeah, so it's not necessarily related to data, but we do have quite a few data people in the book club, obviously. Each month we read a business or management, like nonfiction style book. It's all online, it's all free. It's a great little community that we're building. We have a Discord channel where people come and talk about the book that we're currently reading. Each month the members vote on the book that we're going to cover. In fact, because today is, the 1st of April, we're starting a new book. We're starting No Rules Rules, which is about Netflix. It's by Reed Hastings, the CEO and founder of Netflix. I just started. I've already started annotating it because it's already interesting. But that's the book we're reading for April. So if any of your listeners want to join a fun, inclusive book club and read cool books like that and others, they're most welcome to come join us.
And this
It's
is
called,
not an
it's
April.
called The Badass Bookshelf. It's not a Fool's joke. It's not an April's Fool's joke.
It's not an April Fool's joke. It is a badass bookshelf. I love it. So, and you can also connect with Tristan on LinkedIn. I'm sure that you'd be happy to connect with anybody on LinkedIn,
Of course.
just as I have. So, thank you everybody for joining, and we look forward to continuing the conversation next time.